if you've recently felt like just an absolute tourist in your own native language, like scrolling through a comment section or just listening to a younger generation talk and hearing words that sound vaguely like English but make, honestly, zero logical sense.
Oh, yeah. The disorientation is real.
Right. It is. And if you're feeling that, you are not losing your mind. The language is actively mutating around us. It can leave you feeling like you're wandering through a foreign country without a map, just trying to decipher what people actually mean.
And that disorientation is completely valid. We generally operate under this assumption that, the rules of our language are relatively fixed, or at least that they evolve at a really slow generational pace.
Like over decades.
Exactly. But the current landscape is shifting beneath our feet at a speed that is, frankly, unprecedented in linguistic history.
Which is the core mission for today's deep dive. We are taking a fascinating stack of sources to look at this. We've got a brilliant article breaking down the newly minted slang term, low-genuinely.
Such a wild word.
It really is. Plus, we're looking at some incredibly sharp investigative reporting from the New York Times and the deeply researched commentary of linguistics author Adam Alexic.
A great lineup.
Yeah. So our goal for you listening today is to decode how modern internet language is evolving, mutating, and in some cases, completely breaking down into sheer absurdity. The central mystery we are looking at is what actually happens when two perfectly good functioning words crash into each other at high speed to create a bizarre mutant hybrid. So, okay, let's unpack this.
Well, to truly understand this new, highly complex mutant word, low-genuinely, we can't just put the hybrid itself under the microscope. We really have to examine its DNA first.
Makes sense. Start at the beginning.
Right. And that means looking closely at the baseline evolution of its root word, which is low-key. Because studying how low-key changed over the last, 2 decades, it proves something vital about linguistics.
Which is?
That slang doesn't just spontaneously generate in a vacuum. It transforms to serve very specific, very pressing cultural needs.
Okay, let's look at that baseline first. The literal versus the slang. Because if you crack open a standard Merriam-Webster dictionary, low-key is just a standard utilitarian adjective.
A very boring one, honestly.
Yeah, exactly. It just means of low intensity. Like you might use it to describe a small, quiet wedding, just a few friends, some acoustic music in a backyard, nothing flashy.
Or a film director using low-key lighting for a moody scene.
Right, right. It is quite literally a descriptor for something operating in a lower register. But then it morphs into a slang adverb, and the function of the word fundamentally changes.
And the historical context of that morph is essential. Because it didn't just happen overnight on a smartphone app.
It feels like it did, though.
It does. But according to a really great retrospective in Later magazine, the slang usage of low-key has its roots in African American Vernacular English, or AAVE, dating all the way back to the early 2000s.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, and I mean, AVE has historically been the vanguard of American linguistic innovation. It constantly creates these incredibly nuanced terms for in-group communication long before they ever get co-opted by the mainstream.
My understanding from the sources is that the way AAVE utilized the term essentially flipped the dictionary definition inward, right?
Yes.
So instead of describing an external event like that quiet backyard party, it became a way to describe an internal psychological state.
That is the crucial pivot right there. If you look at how Urban Dictionary eventually chronicled the slang version, it's defined as a way to express genuine intent or interest in something, while simultaneously dismissing its importance to the outside world.
Which is why...
Right, it became a tool for managing social perception.
Which is such a complex psychological maneuver when you really think about it. You are deploying a word to actively hide how much you care, while simultaneously winking at your audience to let them know that you do actually care.
Exactly. It's a dual signal.
When I try to picture how this functions in everyday conversation, the best way I can visualize the vibe is it's like wearing a perfectly tailored, incredibly expensive tuxedo, but you deliberately pair it with beat-up, muddy sneakers.
Oh, that's a great visual.
Right. Like you clearly care deeply about the underlying thing, the tuxedo, but you're using the sneakers to project this desperate aura of detachment.
And the tension between the tuxedo and the muddy sneakers is exactly where the meaning lives. The tuxedo represents the earnest sincerity, and the sneakers They're the mechanism of plausible deniability.
Yes.
You're creating a safety net for your own emotions. And honestly, the reason people need that safety net becomes incredibly obvious when you look at the digital environment Gen Z and Gen Alpha grew up in.
It's ruthless.
Completely ruthless. The internet is permanent and it can be intensely critical. Unfiltered earnestness is often treated as a huge vulnerability online. If you try really hard at something and fail, or if you care too much about something uncool, you risk being mocked endlessly. Cringe is like the ultimate social sin right now.
Right, so you preemptively mock yourself. You build the defense mechanism right into the sentence before anyone else can get to it.
Exactly.
The sources gave a really great real-world example of this in action. So for you listening, imagine someone who is a massive, lifelong super fan of a musician. They know every lyric. They own the vintage tour shirts. They are deeply invested.
They care a lot.
They care so much.
Yeah.
But when that musician announces a local tour date, instead of screaming from the rooftops with joy, they might text a friend and just say, I am low-key obsessed with getting tickets to this.
Right. Low-key.
Yeah, they are playfully downplaying the intensity of their own feelings to manage that social risk of being perceived as, too much.
And you see the boundaries of this behavior even more clearly when you look at its mirror image. Because the slang ecosystem eventually necessitated the creation of an opposite term, high-key.
Of course.
Right. If an event or a feeling is high-key, it signifies that it is unashamed, it is intense, and it is absolutely not chill. If you say, I am high-key panicking right now, you are stripping away all that armor.
There's no plausible deniability there.
None. You are putting your feelings on a billboard, whereas low-key is, whispering them while pretending to be distracted by your phone.
Which brings us right to the tipping point.
Yeah.
The internet had this perfect, nuanced tool for expressing detached sincerity.
But this raises an important question.
Wait for it.
If low-key already accomplishes this highly specific task of expressing a genuine feeling while acting detached, why did we suddenly need to invent a brand new mutant hybrid word to do the exact same thing?
Because the old tool broke down. And for you listening, this is where we have to pivot from the root word to the hybrid. Because you really need to see the exact moment the language mutated to handle an entirely new, honestly suffocating level of internet irony.
Yeah.
Enter the mutant. Low-genuinely.
It's quite a mouthful.
It is.
Yeah.
And as the name implies, it is the direct blending of low-key and genuinely.
Let's look at the mechanical definition Merriam-Webster provides for this new hybrid. They define low-genuinely as nonchalantly characterizing an emotion, desire, or action as being sincere.
Nonchalantly sincere.
Yes. It is a method of stating that something is entirely real without making a big deal about it.
Which, on paper, sounds completely redundant. It is doing the exact same job as the old definition of low-key. Like, you might hear someone casually say, I low-genuinely want to go to sleep right now, or the store is low-genuinely out of stock.
Right.
It's literally just taking the word genuinely and using brute force to jam it straight into the middle of low-key.
It is a totally clumsy linguistic sandwich.
Very clumsy.
But the redundancy is the point, which we will get to in a second. The immediate puzzle is where this specific hybrid actually originated.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Because the New York Times actually tracked down the origin story of low-genuinely. And the context is almost incredibly absurd.
It really is.
They reported that it exploded into the mainstream via a 2025 video that went massively viral. And I'm going to read you the exact text from the caption of this video, and I have to warn you, it feels completely ridiculous to say out loud. It is just a masterpiece of modern internet chaos.
The transcription of it really highlights how far standard English has been stretched.
Okay, here we go. Bear with me. The caption reads, when the pastor at the altar, low-key, asks your wife if she wants to be your lawfully wedded wife, and instead of saying, I do, she genuinely says genuinely, and you low-genuinely tweak out.
Wow.
I mean, I'm stumbling just trying to parse the grammar of that. It feels like a fever dream.
What's fascinating here is the sheer density of the irony. When sociolinguists break down a caption like that, they point out there are 3 distinct ways to read it, each revealing a totally different layer of digital culture.
Okay, what's the first one?
The first interpretation is the most straightforward. It is a completely nonsensical riff on language.
Just noise.
Yeah, just words thrown together for the sake of rhythm and absurdity, functioning as a linguistic prank meant to confuse anyone who isn't chronically online.
A gatekeeping mechanism, basically. Like, if you don't instantly get the joke, you aren't part of the in-group.
Precisely. Now, the second interpretation is a bit more meta. You could read it as a highly self-aware parody of the internet's own linguistic exhaustion.
I like that.
Right. The creator knows that online slang has become ridiculous, so they are taking it to its absolute logical extreme. It's holding up a funhouse mirror to the audience, mocking the fact that internet users can't even get through a hypothetical sacred wedding ceremony without relying on detached, ironic slang.
Okay, but there is a third interpretation,
Yeah.
right? And this is the one that really challenges how we view standard communication.
Yeah, the third way to read it is that this isn't nonsense, and it isn't just a parody. It might actually be a highly complex, evolved dialect that only fluent speakers of what we currently call brain rot can truly comprehend.
A whole new dialect.
Exactly. To a specific subset of younger internet users, that convoluted sentence might convey a highly specific, nuanced emotion about the fear of vulnerability in romantic relationships that standard English simply cannot capture.
Okay, I really have to push back on that third interpretation. I mean, I understand the academic desire to find deep meaning in how language evolves. But is this actually beautiful linguistic evolution happening in real time, or is this just the internet putting words in a blender and drinking the word vomit?
That's the big debate.
Calling it a highly complex dialect feels like we are giving too much credit to a generation that spends 12 hours a day scrolling through algorithmic sludge. Are they building a new language, or has their old language just degraded?
It is a vital challenge to the premise, because to determine if it is evolution or just, word vomit, we really have to look under the hood at the mechanics of why the internet is throwing these words in a blender in the first place.
Right.
And that brings us directly to the academic exploration of that term you just alluded to, brain rot.
Which is a phrase that gets tossed around in comment sections constantly. I mean, usually as an insult, but it rarely gets rigorously defined.
Exactly. So to define it, we need to bring in the work of Adam Alexic. He is the author of AlgoSpeak, How Social Media is Transforming the Future of Language. Alexic provides a really clear mechanical framework for answering your question about whether this is evolution or degradation.
Let's hear it.
His entire thesis hinges on a phenomenon he calls slang overload.
And Alexic defines slang overload as what happens when a word gets structurally weakened by its own popularity, right? Like it becomes a victim of its own success.
That is the core mechanism. Alexic argues that when a word is overused online, and we're talking about millions of users typing it, shouting it in videos, memeing it thousands of times a second across the globe, the word suffers from a form of context collapse.
It just loses its edge.
Completely. The original nuanced meaning gets diluted to absolute zero. It is no longer a tool for communication. It basically becomes a vocal tick.
Which explains exactly why the old definition of low-key broke down. Through relentless global overuse, it was just hollowed out.
Exactly.
It no longer signaled the delicate tuxedo and muddy sneakers balance of caring but pretending not to care. It just became conversational filler. People were literally saying, I low-key went to the bank today, which, I mean, that means nothing.
The word died of exhaustion. And that is where Alexic's formal definition of brain rot comes into play, because he argues that brain rot isn't a medical condition or a moral failing of the younger generation.
Right.
It is simply the overuse of words. It is the linguistic exhaustion of our digital vocabulary, driven by an environment that consumes culture way faster than it can create it.
And if you are listening to this and reeling your eyes at phrases like skibidi riz or sigma male, hang with us here, because this isn't just kids being annoying. This is a massive structural linguistic shift.
It really is.
Alexic gave some incredibly specific examples of this brain rot phenomenon in his interview with The Times. He cited absurd phrases that have totally taken over platforms like skibidi riz Ohio and matcha labubu Dubai chocolate.
Sounds completely unhinged.
It does. To anyone outside the algorithm, those sound like the ravings of a broken machine.
But inside the algorithm, they serve a very specific function. There are completely frictionless combinations of high engagement buzzwords. And we have to talk about how the algorithms demand this kind of novelty.
Yeah, the algorithm is the driving force here.
Exactly. Social media platforms prioritize watch time or dwell time. If you use standard English in a caption, the algorithm ignores it and the user just scrolls past. But if you use a bizarre string of mutant words, a user's brain literally has to pause to process the syntax.
Just to figure out what they just read.
Right. And that fraction of a second of confusion increases the dwell time on the video, which signals to the algorithm that the content is engaging, which then boosts the video to millions more people.
So the algorithm is actively rewarding the mutation. The machine incentivizes the word vomit. So what does this all mean for a word like low-genuinely? Let me try to crystallize this with an analogy for the listener.
I'd love to hear it.
It's like an over-photocopied document in an office, right? We took the original word low-key, and we ran it through the social media photocopier a billion times. We copied it and copied it and copied it until the ink completely faded and the paper became totally illegible.
Yeah, the slang overload.
Exactly. Nobody could read the underlying emotion behind the word anymore. So to fix the problem, we had to grab a thick black Sharpie and literally scribble the word genuinely over the top of the faded, useless paper, just so other humans could read our sincerity again. And boom, you've created low genuinely.
That's perfect. If we connect this to the bigger picture, your photocopier analogy proves exactly why low genuinely isn't just random, meaningless word vomit.
It has a purpose.
It is a mutant, absolutely, but it is a mutant spawned out of sheer communicative necessity. The original word was killed by slang overload, but the users of the language still desperately needed a tool to convey that highly specific feeling of detached sincerity.
And he still had the emotion.
The emotion didn't go away, just the word for it did. So they built a new tool out of the scraps they had laying around.
They basically duct taped two broken words together to make a working hammer.
That is the reality of modern linguistics. It is adaptation in the harshest, fastest-moving environment humanity has ever created. The digital attention economy.
Yeah.
The language has to mutate just to survive the pressure cooker of the algorithm.
Which brings us to the ultimate takeaway for you, the listener.
Yeah.
Because at first glance, spending this much time analyzing a chaotic internet term like low genuinely might seem like, a trivial exercise. Just a way to decode youth culture or figure out what the comments on a random video mean.
But the stakes are actually much higher.
Much higher.
It points directly to the fundamental mechanics of human connection in the 21st century.
Yes, we are witnessing how rapidly our digital environment is forcing us to alter our own communication. We are constantly tweaking our vocabularies, mashing concepts together, and discarding entire dictionaries of slang, all in a desperate attempt to ensure that our actual human emotions are being heard and understood through the deafening noise of the internet.
We're just shouting into the void.
We are. We just want to know that when we say we care about something, the person on the other end of the screen actually believes us.
And as the algorithms continue to demand constant, frictionless novelty, the words themselves are just getting caught and crushed in the machinery, which forces us to look ahead at where this trajectory inevitably leads.
Yeah, it leaves us with a truly lingering and somewhat unsettling question to ponder. Building right off Adam Lexek's concept of algospeak, if these algorithms are driving the rapid mutation of our words to the point of terminal slang overload, like a reality where we are burning through vocabulary so aggressively that we have to invent bizarre duct-taped hybrids just to say a simple phrase like, I care what happens next.
It's a scary thought.
Will we eventually reach a point where human language becomes so fragmented and localized by algorithms that we actually need artificial intelligence just to translate human internet slang back into plain English for other humans?
The irony is staggering. We build the algorithms mutate our language to the point of incomprehensibility, and then we have to rely on AI to help us talk to our own neighbors.
That's a wild cycle.
If the cycle of slang overload continues to accelerate, an algorithmic translator might not just be a convenience. It might be a requirement for baseline human interaction.
Well, until we all have to download AI translation chips into our brains just to decipher low genuinely and whatever mutant hybrid inevitably replaces it next week, we hope we've been able to provide you with a reliable map for this strange, ever-changing linguistic territory. You don't have to feel like a lost tourist in your own language anymore. You just have to recognize the machinery at work behind the words. Thank you so much for joining us on this exploration, and we will catch you on the next deep dive.